Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ryu, and today we'll be looking at base infrastructure and how to better build bases and make use of our base terrain space. Now, with this video today, we're going to be using a special mod that allows us to mine resources faster, as well as build units and buildings instantly. Now to get started, let's take a look at the standard Terran base. For a while, we're just going to move these barracks out for now. Now a typical standard base may have, at the start, your depot wall and your barracks, your orbital command center, and then later your 111. So in this case, your factory and your starport. Now, a lot of players may be building their buildings aimlessly, whereas they may place it something like this. Now, there isn't anything wrong just yet when we place our buildings randomly, but let's take it a very case-specific situation. Let's say we're going Hellions and Banshees. You may start by making the reactor on your barracks, then the tech lab on the barracks, and you may notice right away there's already an issue. We have to move our building quite a little while away, which is a little bit inconvenient. Now when we want to lift our factory onto here, it's going to take quite a longer travel time, whereas the starport, when it's right beside the building, can just quickly get on. Now, apart from just small things like that, there are other mistakes when building bases. For an example, let's say we have buildings all touching together like so. Let's say we take this barracks here in the bottom corner, and we try and rally some Marines this way. Notice how they'll only come out one way? Well, let's take this to a little bit more extreme. Let's say we surround this barracks with other barracks. Let's go ahead and grab this barracks here as well. Notice how when we train units, it has to come out this way. Well, what happens if we have a building here blocking this? Let's take a look. When this barracks flies over here, all of a sudden, the units are now forced to come out through here. So then that leads you to question, what happens if we have two more barracks covering these sides? This will lead to trapped units, or otherwise, stuck units, where the building may not be able to produce, or units may not be able to come out. What happens if we lift this building? Now units can come out here, but no matter where we rally it, it'll always come out this direction. This is most predominantly a problem with factory units. Now let's say we take a factory, right, and we build our barracks here, and let's move the starport here. And let's say we build something bulky like a Thor. The Thor can come out the three corners normally. However, that's not what we want to look at. Like the barracks, it'll still get stuck if it's built in the corners or buildings take up the corners. However, what you want to look at with a factory is when the buildings are lined up like so. Now, I want you to notice that we have the building grid on. This will be important for understanding how the building works. Let's say we take these three factories, which have a space of one grid unit between them, and two grid units for add-ons. Now let's say we build three tech labs, and now let's say we take these two factories, and we try to rally units this way. Notice how the first one came out straight up from the top? The Thor will naturally produce units to come out through the top. However, when you have units with a 1x1 blockage, say like here, the Thor will get trapped within the two tech labs because there's only a 1x1 space for it to move, meaning the only possible place for it to spawn is right here when rallied downwards. Of course, that being said, we could rally these Thors upwards now. Upwards, upwards, upwards. But now let's take this middle factory and rally it upwards. Or to the diagonal. It gets stuck. For most people, they'll have their rally in one area, so your Thors will get stuck. And we won't be able to make any more. Now, let's quickly go ahead and clear up these units. As well, we'll clear up these add-ons. We'll just quickly move these away. Now let's kill some of these Thors. and we'll be looking at the correct way to place our factories. Now, factory units, specifically units such as the Siege Tank, the Thor, the Cyclone, as well as the Hellbat, have a specific radius through they're able to move, and a specific size. Now, when we have 1x1 spaces like these, there are only two types of units that can get through. Units with a 1x1 size. Units such as Zealots, Marines, Zerglings, Banelings, Hydralisks, Roaches, Ravagers, I think, Reapers, Marauders, Ghosts, and, of course, Workers. However, let's say we have a hole like this, where there is a grid blocking it between the middle, but you can still see the two diamonds when you put a unit here and a unit here. All of a sudden, a little bit less units get to be able to move through. Marines can still move through. However, a unit like the Hellion may not be able to move through. And why is this? The Hellion, although it's a similar size to the Marine, as in it's 1x1, it's a little bit different as it's a 1x2 unit. Now let's take a better look at what I mean. Let's say we take a worker and we try to build a depot. The Hellion occupies roughly 2 units of space, whereas the Marine only occupies 1 grid of space. For this reason, units like the Marine or the Zergling may be able to get through, even though this may look like a wall. However, when we put the building up one like this and they're connected, all of a sudden, no unit can get through. For this reason, it is important that you know the size of your units and how to build your buildings so they fit a certain dimension. So we're now going to move these barracks out of the way. We're going to move these factories out of the way, as well as this starport. We'll also grab all these extra units and just throw them over here. Actually, let's take these stores real quick and remove these random buildings. We'll be taking a look at what the best way to place our buildings in a standard base would be for both factories, barracks, and not really starports. We'll get into that a bit later though. So let's go ahead and move these units now. Now another thing players may do is they may place their buildings in the back randomly, like so. Now what do you think the issue with this right away is? Sure, the buildings are able to fit, and sure, we may be able to make some units or our add-ons. But now, let's go ahead and say we put a eBay here. Not only is the worker trapped until we lower this building, but let's say we go ahead and build some siege tanks from this factory. It's actually stuck. So, a lot of the time, players in the newer levels may just place their buildings in a way where units get stuck. This is obviously bad because we didn't pay our units to sit on their ass or do nothing. So we're going to go ahead and destroy this factory, but we'll move these two. Now, the main lesson I want to bring up here is, our buildings are not meant to be placed in or behind the mineral line, unless there is a very specific reason, such as hiding it, and in which case we only do it with one building. Let's go ahead and move these tanks and these Thors. The most ideal way to first off place barracks, let's say we are on 812, would be to do it in lines. Units in general, or buildings in general, want to be placed in lines that are going vertically. I almost said horizontal. So let's take a look at why we want vertical. When we place our buildings in a vertical line like so, where the 3x3 is connecting, they come out in a very nice shape. And when we rally units in one direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they come out. Now let's say we want to rally them upwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They come out. And when they want to go to this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, this also gives them the freedom of making add-ons. 1, 2, 3, and so on. Which you guys get the idea, of course. Now, let's take a look and see what happens when we place them horizontally with each other. So let's grab building 1, building 2, building 3, and building 4 and 5. Now, right away, the first thing you should notice is the only building that can actually make an add-on is this one over here. Now, you may be saying, okay, sure, we can make an add-on, but then we can just move it down like this. Now, you can see how, as I'm placing the buildings, we may run into that issue where we get trapped. Specifically, right here is a trap. So, that's again a no-no. Another thing is, let's say we want to rally units here. Sure, they come out, but we want to rally units here. They may come out. And we want to rally units here. Yeah, they may come out. But here's the other thing. Our units will have a tough time and there's really no way to get between here. And this also takes up a lot more space than if we were to put 3 layers here, here, and here. So again, this is a bad example of how we'd want to place our buildings. This just takes up too much space. For this reason, when placing buildings, you want to do it in a vertical line as that will conserve the most space. And you may be asking yourself, who cares if I want to conserve space? Can't I just build my buildings outside of my base, like say here or here? And the answer is, yeah, sure you could. But when you think about it, you want your main production as the Terran race to be the most protected thing. For that reason, we want our buildings to be inside of our main so they can't be sniped. The golden rule of Terran is, as soon as somebody gets on top of your production, that's typically GG when you're not able to make more units. Especially with how long Terran buildings take with workers to make. So again, let's look at the most ideal way to place our barracks. Now, with just barracks, we'd want to place them like so. And we'd want to put a 1x1 line for the add-on. As well, we can leave small little spaces, like here, empty, and instead place the buildings downwards. And this allows units like Marines to easily get through and around our base. We can go through this way, we can loop through here, we can go through here. This is a nice and convenient base. However, let's say we go ahead and build more tech labs. The issue with this type of way of putting your buildings down is, sure, this still works for Marines, but let's go ahead and take a siege tank. From what we covered before, we know the siege tank cannot move through a 1x1 space, so when we try to move it through here, because this only benefits 1x1 units, it cannot get through, and as a result, your siege tanks may lag behind, or your Thors may lag behind, or other units that are of 2x2 or larger value. For this reason, this again is still not the ideal way to place our buildings. So this leads to bring the question, what would the best way to place our buildings be? Well, the best way I like to place my buildings is the mech way of placing your buildings. Rather than leaving a 1x1 space, we may be taking up slightly more space, however, we're instead going to put 2x2 radiuses beside the buildings. So let's lift these up again. We'll maybe put a 2x2 here. We'll put 2 buildings together, 2 buildings together, and we'll leave a space that is 2x2. Now let's go ahead and grab our siege tank again. Our siege tank is freely able to move between the buildings. It's able to weave through, and it's able to just get around our base. And you may be asking yourself, who gives a crap? Why does it matter if the unit's able to get through our base or not? Well, for a lot of reasons. Number one, the few seconds it may take your siege tank to get through and to the army may be game-changing. 2, when we have our units able to conveniently walk through or get cover between our base, let's say we're against Zerglings, we may be running from a Ling run-by. Like this, we can place our units between choke points, so that if Lings come, they have less surface area to attack us in. Or 3, we're splitting, we can run through the buildings, like so, generally path, and you see how they automatically split on their own? It's reasons like these that we have the entrenched positions to kind of get through and conveniently weave our way through our base. This also allows us to quickly still make buildings in a close spot to our ramp so they get out the quickest. As well, let's say somebody drops over here. Let's say we were to have a building right between here, or right between here. Rather than going through these like tiny little narrow points to get to a siege tank drop that's over here or over here, we would have to actually go all the way around, meaning all the time we're over here, we're taking damage, unless we lift our buildings, which then we're not producing our units. So like this, we're able to, even though it's through chokes, we're still able to get to the attack quickly enough and still kind of form a concave at this attacking position. Now, that's That is by far the best way to place your buildings. Remember, with 2x2 holes between them, and 2x2 spaces between them. If you need help understanding the size difference, remember, if a supply depot can fit between two buildings, then it's good to go. Even for units that may be bigger, such as the Thor, can actually still move through. Now, let's take a look at it. The Thor is significantly bigger than the siege tank, but let's look at where. The legs are where it's smaller, and it's only the top part of the body where it's bigger. So when we take a depot at its legs, we can slightly move it over a bit. Let's grab that depot again. We can see the Thor is still in the 4x4 radius. Wonderful. Let's move it one more time, just so we confirm. See that? 4x4. For that reason, it will fit. Now, what about things such as missile turrets, or engineering bays, or armories, or starports? Starports can really be put anywhere, but I typically like to keep them in the same line, because I want my units to be getting out the quickest. As well, I like my units to still be able to move through each other. So I may have my starports like that, and then my factories like this. So when I hotkey these units, we can go medevac, tank, marine, and you can see they can still kind of get through, and they can still weave through here. We can maybe even move this a little bit up, so they can also get through here. And what about static defense like missile turrets, PFs, or upgrades? For me personally, I like to put my upgrades in the very back of my main base. This is because the main base is the most protected space in the map. It's the furthest away from your opponent. So, the way I would place my upgrades are Engineering Bay 1, Engineering Bay 2, just behind the mineral line. Maybe my Ghost Academy over here, my Fusion Core over here, my Armories over here. And I like to keep them lined off so they're not also walling off the backspace here. Because let's take a look at what happens if we wall off right over here. Now there are two reasons why this is a terrible thing to do. The first reason, let's say they have a Liberator. What they can do now is they can put their Liberator between here. And let's go ahead and grab some Marines. And let's see, without getting in this range here to shoot it, there's no way for the Marines to not take damage to clear the Liberator. They can't hit the Liberator from here. They can't hit the Liberator from here. They can't get through to over here, here, or here. Meaning the only way for them to kill it is to walk into its range. And even then, they still can't reach it. So this would be a big example of a problem. This Liberator would be able to clean and control all of these mineral patches. That's a solid 5 mineral patches, which is a lot of mining, considering there's only 8 mineral patches per base. So if you can, you want to avoid walling off your base with buildings in the back. I see Protoss and Zerg players do this a lot. They may wall off a building over here, so then we just put our Liberator here, and they have to go all the way around, or through here, to hit the Liberator. So putting your buildings just so they're touching the mineral line but not blocking off the back is a good way to place them. Now, as for static defense, such as missile turrets, the best place to place a missile turret is typically in your mineral line. Just like this, it's covering all this range here. Let's see, the missile turret has a range of about 7. So if we take a depot and we move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this is the furthest it may hit. So 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. We can maybe draw a grid, but you should get the idea when we place the depot over it. This way it allows us to cover the main mineral line, however, maybe not the gas. In which case, you can always take another missile turret and you could place it here, maybe here, or maybe even here. However, you don't want to build too many missile turrets, so the best place to place only one missile turret is ideally in the mineral line. Specifically, you may want it to face, though, towards the enemy. So maybe in the exact middle may not be good for you. Maybe you'd want to place it so they can't sneak up on you. So in this case, the attack pattern for our enemy, if they were to come down on us, would be to hit right here, this side, as opposed to this side. So we could instead place our missile turret here, so it gives us more range here. And our rally, which they have to go more towards our base in here, may be less defended, but our barracks units, or our factory units, would be able to better trap them. Now, the next thing we can look at for Terran is depot walls. Now, typically at your natural, you may have a large space here, and you may be thinking to yourself, what can I do here to stop lings from just running in or units from carelessly running in? There are a lot of ways. We can make depot walls, such as this one right over here, which perfectly walls off here. Units cannot get through no matter what they do until they break it. Or we could do something like an engineering bay wall. So let's quickly grab these tanks. And we can instead construct a engineering bay wall. So we could do depot, engineering bay, and another depot. Now, what makes this wall good is we still have the 2x2 for units to get through. We can prioritize which side they get through, so they may only be routing through this way, or this way, and we have our upgrades all together here. The bad thing is, our upgrades are a little exposed. However, this is a cheap and very quick wall if you need to have one right away. So let's go ahead and break this again. And I'll show you what the most standard wall is in the TVZ matchup. The most standard wall you may see early game is possibly this wall. Depot, a depot, and a CC with maybe another depot. And the reason this wall is good is because it allows us to build our third base and still wall off. However, there are many different ways to build the CC wall. Some people may even place it like this, a little bit in the back, but we can build the depot here and here. The problem with this type of wall though is, what happens when we try to get the siege tank through? There's not enough space, because if we look carefully, there's a little bit of that orange. Oh, actually, it's just tiny enough to fit through. So this would be another good example of a wall. Now, other walls you could make could be anywhere. We can look at anywhere on the map and think to ourselves, where's the spot Xur can run by us from? We could say over here, and we can make a depot wall, which, by the way, depot walls are a very good habit to get into. They can keep our supply raised, as well as help us defend against run-bys. We could build a depot wall there. We could build it on ramps like these, where we put it like this, and then we just fill in the holes, the corner holes here with extra depots. So something like here is perfectly walled off. No units can get through. And let's take another look at another place you can depot wall. Another place would be maybe here, here, and here. And as you can see, we right away block paths with these types of walls. And whenever we need to, we could run from, let's say we have Marines here and Zerglings over here. Our Marines could quickly get behind the wall, raise it, and the Lings may get trapped or be forced to go around to hit our Marines. Walls can be very important for saving yourself. Now, there are other types of walls you can make, especially in matchups like TVT. You may have noticed this map has Reaper jump-up spots. On this map specifically, Blue Shift, you can actually block off 3 out of 4 of the Reaper jump-out spots with just a single depot. Like this, the Reaper cannot jump up here. If you put a depot here and here, the Reaper cannot jump up here or here. Let's take a Reaper to test this theory out. First, let's try going through this wall here. Everything's a little bit cluttered, let's move it out of the way. The Reaper cannot get up here no matter how you position it. As a result, it has to go through here. Now, let's try this wall and this wall. Let's take the Reaper. Let's first have it try to go through here. It may be able to get through here, but it cannot get through the very edge. So it's forced to go through this tiny little choke. Now, we can actually still block off this choke if we place 3 more depots. Though typically you don't really want to place those 3 extra depots, as the Reaper will still be able to get in through these tiny little pockets. The last choke here, which is the hardest to wall off, is still actually possible, but you will still have chokes. What you could do is you could do depot, eBay, eBay. And then if we look, no matter where the Reaper jumps up into here, it could be through this little pocket here, or this little pocket, it would not be able to get through. And that shall conclude today's video on base infrastructure, how we place our buildings, and how we wall off. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.